Okay, I'm recording now. Okay, so let's actually get started. My talk is titled Too Many Projects About Gender, Language, and Technology. I also have too many slides about gender, language, and technology. Fortunately, about half of them are from a 10-minute conference talk. So I think we're going to be okay on time. I timed this out. It's going to be about a 30-minute talk. Please hold your questions to the end, and also please hold on to your hats. So first, let's flash back to December 2014. This is when I interviewed at Whitman College. I was at a pivotal point in my research, or in other words, when we say pivot in the tech industry, that means I'm going to go in another direction. So at this point, I was ready for a change in my research. During my time at Grinnell College, I had been developing a focus on persuasive technology. So what is that? Persuasive technology is designed to change what we think and do, according to the founder of the field, B.J. Fogg. Or in other words, persuasive technology is designed with an explicit intention to change people's attitudes and behaviors. And I found this really fascinating because it is kind of an ethical slippery slope. It's an emerging area of interdisciplinary human-computer interaction research. It's been going on since the late 1990s, and I got involved in the mid-2000s. And so as I was preparing my job talk, and I was thinking and reading about changes I wanted to make in my own life, I asked the question, can computers help us use more empowered language in our everyday lives? And so I mocked up this interaction design for the conclusion of my job talk, where I was talking about possible future work. I'm going to be quiet and just walk you through this. So the idea was that perhaps we could take a more empowered view of our own choices by using more empowered language. And the questions I had at this point were, well, how could we build this? Is it actually effective at changing the user's mindset? And is this something that users might find valuable, or is this really kind of too intrusive to ask to change someone's word choice in something as intimate as, let's say, a text message? I never actually built this, but it sparked an interest in applying my expertise on persuasive technology design to a previously unexplored area, the area of language. Before I worked on persuasive technology, so bringing in a third part, I earned my PhD in the value-sensitive design lab at the University of Washington. So what is value-sensitive design? Value-sensitive design is a theoretically grounded approach to the design of technology that accounts for human values in a principled and comprehensive manner throughout the design process. And this is a quote from my advisors, Batya Friedman in the iSchool at UW, Alan Borning in computer science and engineering at UW, and their collaborator, Peter Kahn, in psychology. So to say more, key features of value-sensitive design. First, value-sensitive design is an interactional theory. As you may have heard, a notable quote from Kranzberg, technology is neither good nor bad, and nor is it neutral. So we should pay attention to this. We should be proactive when we're designing new technologies. And we should consider not only the direct stakeholders, the people who actually use technology, but also the indirect stakeholders, people who are affected by how the technology is used. And finally, value-sensitive design employs a tripartite methodology, which I'll tell you about over the next 3 slides. So first, conceptual investigations. This is what we can do from our armchairs. Conceptual investigations encompass analyses of stakeholders and values, analyses of potential harms, benefits, and values at stake, theoretical investigations of those values based on the existing literature, drawing on fields such as philosophy, law, and psychology. Technical investigations look at the affordances of the technology itself. How do the technologies feature, and how does the implementation support or hinder the expressions of particular values? And finally, empirical investigations engage with people. So these are concerned with how stakeholders, and not just experts like philosophers or lawyers, understand and prioritize values in the context of use. Empirical investigations are also concerned with how people respond to the artifact itself. These investigations draw on the full range of empirical methods, both quantitative and qualitative. So these three types of investigations, conceptual, technical, and empirical, are iterative and integrative, building on each other throughout the design process. So now we have three pieces: persuasive technology and value-sensitive design applied to people's use of language. Okay, we're bringing three things together that have never been brought together before, as far as we know. So what's the obvious next step? We survey the field. So this is Project Zero in this talk, work that I did with Emma Twersky, class of 2017. She was a math major and a computer science minor. What we did was we wanted to answer the questions: what technologies are already out there in this space of persuasive technology intended to influence how people use language? Why did people make these tools? How do they exert their influence? And then building up to, how can the field of persuasive technology expand to include language behavior as kind of behavior we're trying to change? So the approach of this study, Emma and I built a snowball sample from the popular media because there really wasn't any academic work in this area yet. We looked at news stories, websites, and when possible, we actually ran the apps and tried using them ourselves. And we coded these applications against two different theoretical models. One is the persuasive system design model. So that's the persuasive technology part of it. How is the technology actually trying to change your behavior? But we also coded these applications against a theory of human values. So what were the underlying reasons why people built this, or why would anyone want to use it? What's important that they care about, that they're trying to change? So we did an analysis of 32 different technologies we found out there in the popular media. The reviewers said this part was boring. So at the conference, we spent most of our time talking about 5 examples from our corpus that Emma and I found particularly interesting. And I'll tell you about 2 of them right now. The first is a tool called Textio. The premise of this is that many job ads, especially in the tech industry, appeal more to men than to women. And that's a big problem if you're trying to recruit more women to work at your company. So Textio is this commercial tool to help human resources teams write job ads that are more appealing to women, or at least more gender neutral. I got to try this out. It's pretty cool. Unfortunately, now you can only use it if you're a big corporation with thousands of dollars to spend. Some people who work at the company are not happy about that. But anyway, we'll go on. A second example that we presented in 2017 is Just Not Sorry. And this is a Gmail plugin designed by and for women business leaders. As you type, it underlines words that could weaken your message. Words like sorry, that's an apology. Words like just, that's a hedge word. I think, that's hedging. Intensifiers like very also get highlighted as if they were misspelled. So suggesting that you should make a correction here. And for each underline, if you mouse over that underline, a tooltip displays an explanatory quote prompting you to choose different words. In this case, using sorry undermines your gravitas and makes you appear unfit for leadership. Okay, so persuasive technology, language, value-sensitive design. What do these two tools have in common? Gender. So here's where the fourth piece of this research agenda comes from. And what do we do with all this? I don't know. This is where I started my sabbatical planning. And for lack of a clearer sense of where to get started, I decided to dive deeper into one of those two examples that I just showed you. And that led to the paper, Values and Politics of a Behavior Change Support System. This is digging deeper into Just Not Sorry, and it's building on work that I did with Buyaki Nyatichi in the summer of 2019. And when I presented this work at Ethicomp 2020, here's an email that I included in my presentation. I'm sorry, my presentation is going to be submitted late. I just haven't been able to concentrate. I feel like the world is on fire. I will try to submit my presentation by Sunday. So using these words is not necessarily bad, is one observation I made. Okay, so now diving into that presentation. Why study Just Not Sorry? First, I was intrigued by the intention to support women's power in the workplace. And second, I was intrigued by how we support women's power in the workplace. I was intrigued by an apparent tension between values supported by Just Not Sorry, women's equality on one hand, which is a universal value, but individual achievement and power on the other hand. So these seem like they're in tension, universal values versus power and achievement. Third, I was really surprised by some strong reactions to the concept of Just Not Sorry that Buyaki found in her initial literature search. And so I wanted to learn more about, well, what's going on here? Why do people feel so strongly about this? So Buyaki and I set out to understand this controversy. And since gender is so clearly relevant to Just Not Sorry, we realized we needed to learn more about feminism. In the Feminist Foundations of Language, Gender, and Sexuality Research, Mary Buchholz defines feminism as a diverse and sometimes conflicting set of theoretical, methodological, and political perspectives that have in common a commitment to understanding and challenging social inequalities related to gender and sexuality. And so having this definition under our belts, let us refine the research question we were trying to answer in this study. Could conflicting perspectives on feminism or gender equality explain controversies around Just Not Sorry? Buchholz describes a hierarchical relationship among these sometimes conflicting perspectives. And I'll go into each perspective later as it becomes relevant in the results of our empirical study. So that's what I'll talk about next. Buyaki and I found that many opinions about Just Not Sorry had appeared in the popular media. And to form our corpus, we selected 26 articles that appeared in notable English language sources, you can see them here, and that expressed some opinion on the part of the author. So we excluded straight up news reporting to focus on opinion pieces. One article was actually a conversation between two authors, and so that yielded a total of 27 different published opinions by unique authors, distinct authors. I conducted a qualitative analysis of those articles, guided by methods described in Lazar, Feng, and Hochheiser, using NVivo as a tool for organizing my analysis. I was initially sensitized, of course, to those feminist perspectives as described by Buchholz, also to the values in Schwartz's value circumplex, which we saw just a moment ago, and to values frequently implicated in computer systems as identified by Friedman, Kahn, and Bording. That paper that I cited earlier to define value-sensitive design. So first question. Does the corpus include feminist content? Well, our first observation was that all but 3 of the authors are women. So gender identity is clearly salient here. Moreover, I realized when I made this slide that the authors are almost all white women at that. 2 authors writing for business publications didn't mention gender at all in their opinion pieces. And 3 mentioned gender only to downplay its relevance. So for example, Jenny Erickson writes, "This is an amazing tool, not just for women, but for any people who ever feel the need to talk down about themselves." Only 3 authors mention feminism or a feminist issue. And just 6 mention gender equality or inequality, which is the central concern of feminism. But more than half of the authors expressed some sentiments typical of liberal feminism, which seeks equality of women within existing male-defined institutions. And it's not at all surprising this was the most common perspective because, as Buchholz points out, liberal feminism has become taken for granted in popular culture. Often included in liberal feminism is the claim that women need to adapt to those male-dominated institutions in order to be successful. So for example, Adeline Ginn writes, "Language is the key element in helping women progress to the top and succeed there. The question is then, how can women change their language to convey confidence?" A side effect of this is that masculine behavior is often held up as the norm or ideal to which women need to conform. So for example, Stacy Lestow writes, "My high school English teacher, Mrs. Skoog, encouraged us to say and write what we meant with confidence and authority, the way men did." So that's how liberal feminism is represented in this corpus. We also see representation of cultural feminism, which agrees that men and women communicate differently, but sees feminine communication styles as equal or even superior to masculine communication styles. So for example, Barbara Ellen writes, "Women can also be superb, hyper-intuitive people readers and managers. So while the female approach isn't always softer, when it is, let's own it." And some cultural feminists even argue it's not women, but men who need to change. So for example, Harriet Minter writes, "Let's stop apologizing for being women and instead demand that men behave differently." And so summing up, while cultural feminism is definitely present in the corpus, it's actually mainly found in just 3 authors' opinions. So it's there, but it's not very prevalent. Summing up, is there feminist content? Well, that depends on how you look at it. And this is a quick summary of what I just said. Going back to Mary Buchholz's concepts of feminism, we see that while liberal and cultural feminism are both represented in the corpus, and there's a significant disagreement between those views, many other feminist perspectives are not represented at all. No authors wrote about gender inequality as the root cause of all inequality. With perhaps one exception, all authors seem to assume a middle class, white, straight audience. And all authors take as given the gender binary dividing people into men and women. And in future work, these perspectives might prove fruitful ground for further critiques of Just Not Sorry or other tools like it. Okay, next question. Do perspectives on gender equality explain differences of opinion about Just Not Sorry? The answer is no, unfortunately they don't. As we can see, while cultural feminists criticize Just Not Sorry, liberal feminists both criticize and support it. And so a good chunk of my paper explores their reasons why they come down as supporting or criticizing. And in the interest of time, I'll just present my conclusions from the paper. So what are the disagreements? Authors disagree about 3 main things. First, the value of the intended behavior change. Is it worthwhile? Second, the likely effects of the intervention on the user. And third, broader implications for gender equality. So first, is the intended behavior change valuable? Yes, Many liberal feminists and those who downplay gender answer, yes, it is valuable to use stronger language to enhance one's power and achievement. Others say it's good to be more mindful in choosing our words rather than just softening our language out of ingrained habit. And Emma Lord points out that it's good to be more sincere in that the apologies that we choose to retain in our emails are the apologies that are really heartfelt. And by the way, actually, some critics argue that just not sorry doesn't go far enough to remove this kind of weak language from our vocabulary. So there's also people who are critical, but by saying this is good, we need more. On the no side, some critics argue, no, this behavior change is not valuable. First, it's maybe better to be polite than it is to be forceful. And secondly, just not sorry ignores differences in social context. For example, when writing to your boss versus a subordinate, or to another woman versus a man. And cultural feminists claim these values as typical of more feminine communication styles. Okay, so that's disagreement 1. Disagreement 2, will it have the intended effect on the user? Yes, supporters say that just not sorry will enhance users' confidence through their stronger writing. On the other side, no, it will undermine women's confidence because it's just one more way in which women are blamed and shamed for their deficient behavior. Third disagreement, will widespread use enhance gender equality? Yes, some said it's a step in the right direction or a good way to tackle the current issue until we sort out the bigger issues. So yes, at least somewhat. And on the other side, no, it misses the bigger issues, or as Simon Horobin writes, I just don't think an app will help. So this is study 1. Our contributions were to propose media analysis as a lightweight tool for empirical value discovery and elaboration, to apply this technique to identify and elaborate upon values implicated by just not sorry, and to frame some key questions for evaluating just not sorry that might inform future surveys or interviews and might also apply to other persuasive technologies, particularly with respect to gender or language. So this was a conceptual and empirical study. This was definitely working outside my comfort zone as a computer science. Media analysis was something totally new to me. And so you might be asking, okay, what about technical investigations? How do we get technical with this? First approach would be to revitalize and evaluate just not sorry. It was actually pretty buggy when we first started using it in summer 2019. I poked the main developer at Def Method Inc. to ask about what's going on with this buggy software. And in response to my poke, they decided actually to invest some resources into it and go ahead and develop 2.0. I had a lovely interview with 2 interns at Def Method, sharing with them what I learned in my research. And I also sketched out an evaluation study of just not sorry, which I probably won't execute unless Def Method hires me as a consultant, which I don't think is going to happen. A new idea, a new direction would be to develop a new application, something like Write with Respect. So you may have heard that instead of saying illegal alien, we should say undocumented immigrant, because of course people aren't illegal. There are also many racist phrases that most people don't know are racist. For example, uppity, gyp, peanut gallery. A Gmail plugin could inform you when you use those phrases in your writing, and you could learn about these racist phrases you didn't know were racist and avoid using them in the future. A third new idea is, are you really sorry? Buyaki and I learned that many apologies result from they're kind of knee-jerk apologies. They result from unconsidered habit, and they're polite, but they're not really meaningful. So a new tool might ask, are you really sorry? And if so, help you make a better apology. And if not, suggest something else to say instead, like, thank you for your patience. So that's study 1, just not sorry. Project 1, on to project 2, Degender the Web. This is work in progress, so I have less to say about it. You might remember seeing this opinion piece in the New York Times about 18 months ago. It really went viral with over 2,000 comments on it. I read it when I was starting my sabbatical and ready to be inspired. Here's my vision statement for Degender the Web. What if English had no gender pronouns? Inspired by Farhad Manjoo's essay, It's Time for They, Degender the Web is a Chrome web browser extension that replaces gendered personal pronouns on most web pages with they, them, their. Degender the Web is both a thought experiment and a behavior change support system. When you install it, you'll see how the singular they can function as a universal pronoun. And as you use it over time, you should become more comfortable with the singular they in reading, writing, and speech. And okay, I was just enamored of this idea, and I had just learned how to write Chrome extensions. So of course, my first question was, can I build it? And the answer was, yes, I did. This is a screenshot, not a mock-up. Bob feels bad and starts describing how they feel and why they think they feel that way to Shelley. Because they see that Bob is in pain and struggling, Shelley's natural reaction is to try to alleviate or eliminate Bob is suffering. So yes, it works more or less with some small hiccups. So we can do this. Next question is, should I? And if I'm going to build this thing and release it to the world, how should I go about this? What's the right way of doing this? And so I spent some time, set the software aside and spent some time thinking, reading, and talking to people. And following a value-sensitive design approach, I developed these explicit value commitments for my software development and research on this project. Respect for persons. The tool should respect trans-dominant spaces and individuals' stated personal pronouns wherever possible. More broadly, this tool should adhere to trans-inclusive design guidelines. Partnership and humility. As much as possible, this tool should be designed with stakeholders and not just for them. When making design decisions, I'll defer to the lived experiences of others because I am not trans or NB. I identify as a cis woman. Safety. Acknowledgement of others' contributions must be balanced with potential risks of outing persons who are trans, non-binary, or gender non-conforming, and I'll always defer to contributors' preferences regarding public acknowledgement. Transparency. The behavior of the tool should be made apparent to the user. You can see that here, showing what changed. Privacy. The tool should not reveal information about the user's browsing behavior and autonomy or user control and freedom. It should be easy to revert the content changes made by this extension, and it should never permanently alter the user's writing. And these value commitments all have technical implications. So where is this project now? Right now it's on hold, and it's on hold thinking about 3 questions. The first one is it right? I am still not sure that I should release this upon the world. I'm still thinking about it. Second, can I make it work better? You saw those technical hiccups where it didn't do quite the right thing. And third, how can I assess whether it's effective at changing behaviors and or attitudes? Does it work? And I'm not an experimentalist, so I need help on this. I need a collaborator who can help me with the experimental design. That's project 2, where we are now. Third project is reading for gender bias. This is also a work in progress. Coincidentally, a tweet on this topic went viral earlier this week and gave me a perfect example of what this project is about. My friend Rebecca Hamlin wrote, "Hey faculty, as someone who just read 500 letters of rec as grad admissions chair, I'm here to tell you that no one ever uses the adjective courteous to recommend a white man. Please think more carefully about the gendered and racialized way you speak about strong students." This is not a new idea. There's research on gender bias in recommendation letters going back some 20 years. You may have even seen this research-based advice on avoiding gender bias in reference writing. If you haven't, email me and I'll send you a link to this article. This is a really helpful handout with some really helpful guidelines, but it can be hard to remember all this while you're writing, especially if you're in a hurry. So can we operationalize this advice by building persuasive technology? Or in other words, can we build something like Textio, but for recommendation letters? As I was doing my literature search, learning more about gender bias in recommendation letters, I found this article reporting that someone was already trying to do exactly this. So I got on GitHub and I found the project, I found the source code, I found this, Reading for Gender Bias, promote gender equality by identifying potential gender bias in letters of recommendation and evaluations, or in other words, autocorrect for bias. And I was really happy to find that project founder Molly Marr had already done all the work of reading and synthesizing the research on bias in recommendation letters. Studies on gender bias show that letters or evaluations written for women are less likely to mention publication projects and research, less likely to include superlatives, less likely to include nouns like researcher, more likely to include minimal assurance rather than a strong endorsement, more likely to highlight effort instead of highlighting accomplishments, more likely to discuss personal life, more likely to include gender stereotypes, more likely to raise doubt, and finally, shorter. And when I joined, so all of this literature work, some technical work, when I joined the project almost a year ago, this is what the tool looked like. I can use it, but I'm guessing most of you can't. It's not very user-friendly. So this is as of about 6 months ago. And so I spent the summer supervising a team of students who built this much more usable web interface, and development of that is still underway. Next steps on the technical front, there are some bugs to fix. I want to test the usability of the software and make sure it's easy to use. There's also some work developing the back end as well. There's a lot of stuff we can look for just by searching for keywords, and not all that work has been done yet. But there's also going to be some challenges for natural language processing. Ideas like raising doubt. That's going to be pretty hard to recognize just from looking at keywords. We're going to need to have an algorithm that is working at a higher level to recognize doubt raisers. And I am not a natural language processing researcher. So again, this is a place where I'm going to have to find a collaborator to work with me on this. Next steps, conceptual and empirical. This is more where my area of expertise is. So what are all the values at stake? So a few that quickly come to mind are not just freedom from bias, but also writing letters that are truthful and accurate and that won't undermine our reputations. That's pretty important as a recommendation writer. So how are these values in tension, and what are the ultimate goals for behavior or attitude change? Because clearly the goal isn't to write a perfectly superlative letter for every student who asks. We want to write realistic letters as well as ones that are supportive. So that's project 3, Reading for Gender Bias. That was 5 years of research in 33 minutes and almost 100 slides. I told you about 4 projects: a survey of technology to influence language use, a media analysis of Just Not Sorry, value-sensitive design of Degender the Web, and development of Reading for Gender Bias. There's a lot more to do. Please let me know if you want to help. And with that, I'd like to acknowledge, I want to thank Whitman College for funding my work, and for many disciplinary colleagues for their encouragement and feedback. And most of all, I want to thank my collaborators so far, including these 9 wonderful Whitman students and alumni. And that's the end. I'll stop here. I'm happy to take any questions you might have. Let's see, Sharon asks, how do you envision us being able to weave together our authentic voice and digital aid in letters? So that's a really good question, Sharon. One approach is that we might do, I'm gonna, hang on a second, I'm gonna switch views here to my God help us, the grid view. To go back and look at Just Not Sorry. Okay, so one example we might take is following just not sorry. Just not sorry, it says, it doesn't say what to say instead of sorry. It says, maybe you didn't mean to say sorry here, and leaves it totally up to you to decide what words you want to use instead. And that's actually the direction that reading for gender bias is going as well. If we look at this example, effort versus accomplishment, the word willingness tends to speak more about effort than concrete accomplishment, speak about concrete achievement rather than abstract effort. The tool doesn't tell you how to do this. It leaves it up to you as a letter writer to decide, is this a change that I want to make? And if so, how am I going to do it? Does that answer your question, Sharon? Yes, in recommendation letters, I try to individualize it so they get a nuanced sense of the students. And I think that's also, I think this word concrete is really key here. And some of the best advice I too ever learned about writing recommendation letters was to tell stories and give concrete examples.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. Dana asks, Académie Française failed miserably at regulating the French language, as Les Parking and Les Weekend reveal. Will technical power be able to accomplish what political power could not? That's a really interesting question, Dana. And I think my answer is yes and no. Yes, because, let me start with no. No, because I don't think technology is ever going to intervene in how we speak. That just seems really improbable to me, that we're going to have like little teleprompters on our glasses telling us what to say. I don't think that's going to happen. On the other hand, there's already some evidence that autocorrect, so just autocorrect, which is trying to be helpful, as well as the suggestion features you see in text messaging and now Gmail, those autocorrect and word suggestion features both actually do influence people's word choice and what they write. So I think my answer is equivocal. I don't think it's going to completely change people, but technology might influence us more than we want to and in unintended ways. Does that answer your question, Dana? Thanks. With an X. William Barres, how does your work consider additional synonymous words that might fit? So right now, I mentioned that there are some, I haven't actually done much work on the back end yet. I mentioned these keyword modules. So these are modules that are just looking for specific words in your writing, words like willingness, ability, competence, effort, challenge, I don't know. So they're just these list of words. And so those lists should be as comprehensive as possible based on the research. So they will likely include many, many synonyms. Does that answer your question, William? So right now we're not doing any smart natural language processing stuff yet. It's just lists of words. John Iverson asks, in your interview with the Just Not Sorry people, did you get a sense of how deeply informed their linguistic analysis is? Are they trained linguists, or are they just going with their subjective assessments of language use? That is a wonderful question, John. So Just Not Sorry is also taking this keyword-based approach, and it is not informed by research. It is informed entirely by two things, which are the popular self-help literature and suggestions from users. And I actually have some pretty deep qualms about this very unscientifically grounded approach. Does that address your question, John?
Yes, absolutely. I remember a conversation I had with my office neighbor, Dana Burgess, who was talking about the fact that linguists now are finding jobs in artificial intelligence and computing fields. And I just kind of wondered how, far those tentacles are extending.
And absolutely. So Textio, which is a commercial product. Okay, it was easier to find it the other way. Textio, where's Textio? Here it is. Textio, which is a commercial product, they actually do employ, linguists and data scientists, as well as software developers. We're actually going to have a couple of guest speakers in CST a few weeks from now. One is Megan Urbach, class of 09. She's a software developer at Textio, and she's going to be bringing with her one of her colleagues who is doing data analysis from a linguistics perspective. So thanks for that question, John. Any other questions? Or I'm really excited. John Iverson said your guest speaker sounds great. I'm really excited that Megan and her colleague are going to be joining us later this semester. And thanks to William also for organizing that. More questions, or shall we all wrap up and get ready for our 1 o'clock classes, which I have to teach at 1 as well. Okay, I'm seeing thanks. And many of us do need to get to our 1 o'clock. So I think I will adjourn here. Thank you for coming, everyone. This was really fun. See you around this semester. Let's see, Lara asked, where can we find a link to the recording? I guess I'll make that available once I get it up on YouTube. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to stop recording now.